Hi, I'm Evaleen from AUsome Training. And at AUsome Training, we're an autistic-led autism training provider, which means we educate other people about autism from the autistic perspective, because the autistic perspective, unfortunately, is missing a lot of the time when people talk about autism. So today I want to tell you a little bit about stimming. So the word stimming is an abbreviated version of self-stimulatory behavior. And decades ago, when professionals observed autistic people and the way we move, so maybe rocking or flapping or moving our hands, whatever, all these kind of repetitive movements or gestures that we do, they looked at it and said, oh, that self-stimulatory behavior, they're stimulating themselves. So that in itself kind of shows how professionals have viewed autistic people, because stimming is actually a really intricate, complex, fascinating thing that autistic people do. But unfortunately, because we're autistic and everything we do is wrong or viewed negatively, someone just decided it was just something that we did to stimulate ourselves. So is stimming self-stimulatory behavior? Sometimes, yeah. Is there a whole lot more to it? Absolutely. And in this video, I want to talk about the different types of stimming. And before I do that, it's important that I say stimming is a human behavior. All human beings stim. There's nothing wrong with it. Not something that needs to be stopped. It's something that we all do. And you know what? We're human beings, so we're going to move in different ways. And autistic people's stims maybe look a little bit different to maybe people who are not autistic. When I talk about stimming, I'm just using that word stimming. But really, I'm talking about a human response to the environment. I'm not using it in the same way that professionals have used it. That's a definition that I had maybe a few years ago, a human response to the environment. I've expanded a little bit on that now, and now I define stimming as a way, a way that we use connect our mind and bodies, and it's a way that we create a sense of balance between our internal environment, so what's going on inside of us, and what's going on in the outside world. So it's something that we do to kind of, create that nice sense of flow or that nice sense of equilibrium between the external and the internal world. So autistic people are kind of defined by our sensory experiences. And what does that mean? It means that we're more sensitive than people who are less sensitive. Okay, that means we take in more information from our surroundings. So it's really important that we get to do our stims, because they're a natural way of filtering through all the massive amounts of information that we're learning from our environment. And if we don't stim, it can create a traffic jam in our brains, basically, where we can't process all the stuff. So it's really important that we can stim. And I'm going to do another video on the functions and the reasons why we stim. But today I'm going to focus on the different types so that we can kind of understand a bit more about what they look like. And maybe, people watching this will be like, oh, I do that too. Oh, that's what stimming is. So let's talk about the different types of stimming. So let's talk about vocal stimming first. So vocal stimming is obviously anything that we do with our voice or our vocal cords or when we make sound. So for example, somebody might hum, somebody might sing, someone might clear their throat. That might be something that someone might do when they're nervous or anxious. We might hum when we're happy or when we're thinking. So anything we do with making those sounds repetitively is a vocal stim. When we say they're vocal stims. They're sounds we make. This repetitive movement, repetitive vibration created by our vocal cords when we make those sounds. And guess what? They're vocal stims that we do to help us to think. So, if you can't think of something, a word, and you're like, what was I going to say? It comes back to us when we do these vocal stims. So there's a clear, relationship between stimming and our minds and our thinking and our ability to recall and our ability to process and our ability to learn, which is so fascinating. Another stim people might do is, a high-pitched screech to show that they're excited. So vocal stims like that are just a way of expressing what's going on inside and putting it out into the external world. So that's just a few vocal stims. I'm sure you can think of loads of other ones yourself. And physical stims are basically anything we do with our bodies. So me right now, when I'm talking, you can see I'm moving my hands all of the time. The reason I'm doing this is because it helps me to process. It helps me to get the thoughts that I have internally into words so that I can put them out into the external world so that you can understand what I'm saying. So my bodily movements or my stims help me to communicate. They help me to do this. Physical stimming can be somebody flapping, could be someone clapping their hands when they're excited, or you know what, a whole audience clapping when they're showing their appreciation for somebody or they were excited about what they said. You know, these are all things that we do as human beings all of the time. You know, it might scratch your head when you're a bit confused, you're trying to focus, you might pace up and down when you're thinking, processing, trying to find the answer to something, trying to understand something that's happened to you. That's all very human, and that's all stimming. And then we have mental stims, and mental stims are things that go on inside our minds that other people can't really see. And mental stimming is, you know, when you're maybe playing with words. You know, I suppose it's just like I'm never bored. As an autistic person, I think a lot, and I suppose mental stimming can be, you know, maybe playing music in your head while you're doing something else. It can be playing around with words when someone's talking. All those kind of cool things that we do in our minds, they're types of mental stimming. Auditory stimming is anything to do with our ears. So we're taking in information this way. So that could be listening to music. One of my favorite stims is listening to a song I really love, and that changes from time to time. But if I really find a song that I like, I can listen to it like 10 times a day. I can listen to it 10 times in a row. You know, some people don't maybe understand that because they don't understand that I'm really excited about it. I love it. I'm autistic, so I'm really emotional about stuff, really passionate. So I get the same enjoyment, or maybe even sometimes more, by listening to the same piece of music over and over and over, whereas somebody else who doesn't experience that might think it's boring, or you know, might not understand why I'm doing it because they're not experiencing that same joy and passion that I am. So yeah, I mean, listening to things, making sounds, and you know, when we put like physical stims or tactile stims, which I'm going to talk about next, together, you know, we get interesting things where people are like making sounds, rubbing their hands, and this physical stim combines with auditory stim. It's really cool, you know, so we can mix these things. It's not like they're all happening separately either. So tactile stimming is anything like that, rubbing, you know, which is probably how human beings started to make sound and music in the first place. Drumming, all of these things are tactile. It can just be that lovely sense of rubbing your hands through something you enjoy. And you know, for some people that would be velvet. For me, not so much velvet. But you know, just rubbing a really nice piece of material. A very normal stim that we tactile stim we do as humans is rub our animals. We pet our cats and dogs. We all love fluffy bunnies. You know why? Oh, because they feel so nice. That's just tactile stimming. Again, we might share our stims because we might rub somebody's back to comfort them. We might rock a baby. That's us sharing our stim to soothe the other person, to soothe the baby. It kind of is a natural thing that comes to us. So stimming, a really interesting thing about it as well is that it's innate. It comes from within. It's you know, it's something that we all seem to know naturally and do naturally. So it's really, really fascinating. And then we have visual stims, and visual stims are, you know, things we see through, we, you know, take in through our eyes. So things that we see. So really human examples of this is watching TV, reading. They're all stimmy things. When you stop and admire a beautiful view, you're taking in this beautiful view around you. You might say, wow, isn't that amazing? What's happening at the same time? You're not just looking at it, you're processing it, and you're having an emotional response. So it's actually changing your internal state. And that's what I mean about creating the sense of balance. So, wow, this view is just so breathtaking. It just makes me feel more connected to the world. Or this view is so breathtaking, I'm starting to feel more relaxed. So the things that we take in from our outside environment, you know, create a response within us. And stimming is our way to kind of balance those out. So to let stuff in and to let stuff out. You know, so expressing our emotions, using our hands to help our words come out. They're all examples of how that our stims help us to create that sense of balance. Other visual stims, one of my favorite is watching like real flames dance in a fire. You know, people might say to me, oh, you know, why don't you get like one of those fake fireplaces, those electronic thing? I'm like, no, it's totally different. It's not the same. And it's not the same because the colors and the intensity and the patterns and the rhythms are not the same. Another visual stim that someone, you know, is admiring something. If you've stopped to admire a beautiful dress on a window as you're walking past a shop, or a beautiful plant or flower, or if you have watched a spider make a web, you know, these are all visual stims. There's lots of kind of stim toys for visual stimming, which might be, you know, these ones that have glitter and color and water and oil, and that you shake it and they mix, and then you can have a really cool time looking at them. Well, again, we're not just looking at them, we're watching how these things interact, and we're looking at the patterns and the shapes, and it's really interesting. And we're learning as we're stimming. You're not just looking at something kind of mindlessly, which unfortunately is kind of how people often think or see the autistic person as doing, which isn't true, of course, because we have so much going on in our minds. How could we not, with all of this information that's coming, we're taking in all of the time. Olfactory stimming is smelling, sniffing, any of those things that any of these things that we take in through our noses. So, you know, wearing a nice perfume, stopping to smell it every now and then during the day, or an essential oil, or enjoying that smell of a freshly cut orange or freshly cut grass. You know, all of these things are stimming, basically human stims. So I hope you have enjoyed my video on stimming. These are the types of stimming. The good news is that stimming is a really, really autistic, a really, really human thing, but autistics are just particularly good at it. We have turned it into an art.